Hi, today on A Fresh Perspective, we're going to talk about something that relates to the subject of anxiety. And this has to do with personality traits. These are called HAP traits, or high anxiety personality traits. And this personality reminds me of a character on a show that I used to watch when I was little called Garfield and Friends. And one of the characters in the part of the show which covered these barnyard animals with Orson the pig, and can't remember all their names, but one of them was Wade the duck. And Wade the duck was a very nervous duck, scared of everything. And so he definitely had HAP traits. As I talk about these HAP traits, I want you to be thinking about if any of them pertain to you. And please leave comments below if you can identify with any of these traits. I'm going to be getting these traits from a book called Anxiety, Phobias, and Panic, a step-by-step program for regaining control of your life, which I found to be a very helpful book and a really interesting book on anxiety. So if you're looking for something to read and maybe help you with that issue, I would suggest getting a copy of this. In this book, the writer talks about HAP traits, high anxiety personality traits. I'm going to read them now. The first one is a high level of creativity or imagination. Now this might surprise you, but it's actually people that are really creative and imaginative that can tend toward anxiety. And the reason that is because it takes sometimes a lot of imagination to think about worst case scenarios. And people that have that good imagination can a lot of times think about those bad scenarios in vivid detail. And therefore it can actually lead them to have great anxiety as they think about future events and they begin to imagine things coming out in very bad ways. And so that's one trait. Another HAP trait is rigid thinking. Rigid thinking, she says, is the tendency to perceive life as a series of either-or alternatives. There's usually a correct way to do things, and it is upsetting when things are not done that correct way. In addition, there are often many things that should, must, or can't be done by oneself or others. And so if you are someone who has very rigid kind of thinking, that could lead to anxiety. Another one is excessive need for approval. The excessive need for approval is often referred to as fear of rejection. An excessive need for approval can also create the tendency to take responsibility for the feelings of others and to be overly sensitive to their needs. A person with this trait often makes it his or her responsibility to keep friends and relatives happy. So you can see that if you're always trying to make everybody happy, that can put a lot of pressure on you and it can lead to greater anxiety. The next one is extremely high expectations of self. There is often an expectation of a much higher level of performance and accomplishment from oneself than would ever be expected from others. Some of you can relate to this, where you are always putting pressure on yourself much more than anybody else is putting on you, but you think people are putting that pressure on you and expect a lot out of you, and so you feel a lot of anxiety. The next one is perfectionism. She says perfectionism is actually a combination of three things: the excessively high expectations mentioned above, the tendency to use all or nothing thinking when evaluating one's actions, and a tendency to focus on small flaws and errors rather than on progress and overall achievement. So if you are always focused on the one little thing that didn't go right, that you didn't do perfectly, that can add to your anxiety. Being perfectionistic. Some of us struggle with that. The next one is actually surprising, and it is the competent, dependable doer. You would think someone who's competent must not have anxiety. I mean, after all, they're so competent, but actually that could be someone who tends toward anxiety. She says the interaction of all of the above factors that we read about before often creates a person who is not only competent, capable, and dependable, but also a real doer, skilled at getting jobs done and done well. And maybe you've had this happen, or you've seen this happen to someone else, that they seem like someone who has it all put together, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they have a major breakdown. And it's because they're able to project competence on the outside, but inside there's actually a lot of turmoil because they're always trying to do everything for other people. The next one is excessive need to be in control. She says a person with this trait places a high value on being calm and in control. So this person always wants to look as if everything is going well. And again, I've talked about this, that can actually add or exacerbate the inner turmoil because they're not dealing with what's really going on underneath. The next one is the suppression of some or all negative feelings. A person with the above traits often suppresses feelings that shouldn't be felt because they might cause loss of control or disapproval from others. Anger and sadness are two common examples. And I talked about this in my last video, but there are some emotions that we suppress and we don't think we ought to feel that way. And especially when we're thinking about negative feelings, we maybe feel guilty for how we feel, or we are concerned that others think we shouldn't feel this way, and how are they going to react if they see how angry I am, or that I'm so sad, or have some other negative emotion about this. And so suppressing our emotions is another trait we have to look for. And finally, the tendency to ignore the body's physical needs. This trait is commonly reflected in the attitude that the body is unimportant. Signs that the body is tired, in pain, or in need of rest or care are ignored or given low priority. A person with this trait is frequently only aware of fatigue when the symptoms of exhaustion are present. And so, if we don't take care of our bodies, it can really come back to haunt us, and it can cause a lot of anxiety. What can happen is you can just go into overload mode. You push your body, you push your body, you push your body, and then all of a sudden, it seems like out of nowhere, your body reacts. So those are the HAP traits talked about in this book, which are the high anxiety personality traits. So please let me know in the comments, are there any of these traits that describe you? I'd like to hear your feedback. Thank you so much for watching this episode of A Frisch Perspective.